Oh my God, what did we just watch this past Sunday? Because I'll tell you what, UFC 250 on the White House was something I have never seen before. It was a blatant worship service to the god of money, power, greed, racism, and capitalism. And today in this video, I want to share with you some of my initial thoughts on what I saw and how a lot of it tracks on directly to white Christian nationalism. Welcome to the channel. Let's get started. What we saw at this UFC White House event really is everything that white Christian nationalism stands for, right? I mean, think about it for a second. You have greed. This whole event was sponsored by the billionaire class with their corporations that are designed to suck up as much wealth as possible, especially in this new industry emerging called the prediction market. So Kalshi and there's another one that I'm blanking on. There are two big ones here that are trying to tell people to bet on the future. Now they're trying to tell you that it's not gambling. You're using information. It's a prediction market, but it's another humongous scam to suck up money from the middle and lower class. In fact, CoffeeZilla, who I love as a YouTuber, did a great video on these prediction markets and how all they do statistically is suck up money from people who don't have enough and transfer it to the top. And that's been a huge thing in America for a long time. We've seen that even with cryptocurrency. Trump created a cryptocurrency and then grifted his audience by doing what's called a rug pull. It's when essentially you tell people that your digital cryptocurrency, like Trump token, is going to go live at X date. But what they don't tell you is that people on the inside have already bought a lot of those tokens for nothing. So maybe they were worth like, 0.2 cents. So you buy 10,000 of them. And then when the market goes live and people buy in publicly, it jacks the price up to maybe 50 cents per token. Well, the people who bought in at 0.2 cents, their money goes way up, right? Their profit goes huge. So then they sell all of their stock and they tank the value of the coin, and the people who put money in publicly lose. It's just a huge legal way of transferring wealth, right? So you have these systems, and look around. If you watched any of that monstrosity last night, there were so many sponsors with companies like that and other corporate brands, Bud Light, etc. I think it's really interesting that we recently celebrated America, that is, the world's first trillionaire, Elon Musk, the man who not even a year ago, maybe a little bit over a year ago, was given access to government agencies to slash funding, to find waste, fraud, and abuse, found none of those things, gutted the USAID, which researchers say cost about 800,000 lives because of Elon Musk's damage, and if not reversed, might cost up to 9 million lives globally. We celebrate that man becoming a trillionaire in this country, while the majority of us can't even survive. And what happens is, if you look around, you'll notice that there's this rhetoric that comes into play right away, especially from conservative Christians, trying to tell you with a straight face that Elon Musk earned this wealth, when he didn't. He didn't. He stole technology. He relied on government contracts. He didn't invent a lot of this stuff. His business practices are shady at best, unethical at worst. He didn't earn this. How can anyone work 1 trillion times harder than someone else? It is impossible. There's no ethical way to become a billionaire, let alone a trillionaire. And when you critique this, all these Christians who claim to read the Bible, which has so much to say about wealth inequality and how the rich abuse workers for unfair profit and how that's condemnable, all of a sudden they tell you that you're just being greedy yourself, that you're being jealous, that you just have envy. As we watch a man worth $1 trillion who gutted an agency that helped people around the world be celebrated. This whole movement is based on these principles. The principle of greed and of hoarding of wealth and of unbridled capitalism. I just discovered this Marxist professor, educator named Richard Wolff. I know I'm late to the party for a lot of you. You're probably screaming like, wait, you just discovered him? Yes, okay, I'm still on a journey. And I was watching a few of his lectures, and by the way, they're so good. And the one thing he said that really stuck with me is that in America, we can debate everything nationally. We can debate when a woman can have an abortion or not. We can debate what marriage is. We can debate what gender is. We can debate all kinds of things, right? Is global warming happening or not? There's always this room that we're allowed to have these discussions on, except for capitalism. Once you bring up capitalism, you cannot have a public discourse on capitalism and if it's actually working or not. Because the word Marxism or Marxist is used as such a slur to shut down any kind of conversation. That's intentional. That's by design. Big business got in bed with big religion in America to merge this idea that capitalism and for-profit businesses is somehow a biblical and godly idea. And the idea of Marxism or critiquing capitalism, that's all really Marxism is somehow tied to communism inherently and therefore bad and evil. I look at that UFC fight and I see all these sponsors that are designed to do exactly what the Christian tradition has condemned for so long. Suck up wealth from the middle and lower class to hoard it. And then they're celebrated. So that's one angle that I think is really worth highlighting here of what we saw last night. This was an ode to greed, an ode to grandeur, or at least an attempt to be. It was so ugly, the whole thing. The fact that they put this over the White House lawn, this behemoth, this monstrosity of a set is unreal. The way that fighters were using rooms in the Oval or in the White House for their locker rooms, I just can't help but think if this was a Democrat, if for whatever reason President Harris had a UFC event on the lawn, can't imagine why she would do that, but let's say that she did. And let's say that fighters were using rooms in the White House that have deep history for their locker rooms. Don't you think that right-wing media would be all over it today? How she desecrated the sacred history of our country. But Trump and his cronies did just that. And he's being celebrated as a true American as we celebrate our 250th birthday and also, of course, Trump's birthday.
First and foremost, I got to thank President Trump for making this happen. Thank you, Dana, all the UFC, everybody. This is unbelievable. It takes such a special person to be able to have the balls to do something like this, and I have so much respect for him. I've, had that for a long time, and I'm just grateful to be here, grateful to be a part of it.
The other pillar of Christian nationalism is violence and domination, and I can't think of a better way of showing that to people than by what we saw last night. But when you look at this event in its context and what it's celebrating, it's so on brand for Trump. This is the same regime that started bombing Iran for no reason. Well, Bibi Netanyahu wanted us to. And is trying to pass off this upcoming peace deal as a huge victory when in reality it does almost nothing that wasn't done before. Only we paid the military-industrial complex more money to bomb kids in Iran. Right? This whole regime is built on violence and domination. That's why right-wing people, right-wing movements and militias are so inherently violent. Don't forget, January 6th is a great example of that, right? It wasn't radical Islam that stormed the Capitol. It wasn't the radical atheists. It wasn't the progressive Christians. It was MAGA Christians and militias that stormed the Capitol building. Some were tried and found guilty of sedition, and Trump pardoned all of them. So yeah, this UFC fight absolutely represented what the values of this regime are: dominance, violence, power, control. There's another one, though, that often gets overlooked, I think, because the ties aren't always made directly, even though there's a direct correlation. Racism. I pulled this clip, I had to. I'm sure you've probably seen it by now. We have a fighter who wins. He knocks out, I think, Derek Lewis. And here's what he says.
Hey, shout out to Trump for having the balls to put some shit like this on. And if I'm gonna say anything, there's only one person more incredible than the Incredible Hulk, and that's my Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. And lastly, Michelle Obama is a man. Am I right, America?
Ladies and gentlemen, Josh Hogan.
This was an event that your taxpayer money helped fund that happened on the White House lawn. You could see the White House right behind this man, wearing an American flag, thanking his Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This is classic evangelical, conservative Christian language, right? And right after, he says that Michelle Obama is a man, repeating a racist and sexist trope that the right has been parroting for over a decade. They're still talking about Michelle Obama in the year 2026. And there are loud applauses. If you listen back, there's even a laugh. And there are reports that Trump smirked when he heard this, which, of course, who would be surprised by that? Would anyone here watching this be surprised that Trump smirked instead of condemning it? Of course not, because Trump believes this. Trump is racist. The MAGA movement is built on this ideology. I mean, and again, look at this regime. The Trump administration is only allowing white Afrikaners to come in as refugees right now. White Afrikaners are not persecuted in South Africa at all. But we're only admitting white people into this country as refugees. We stopped our refugee program almost entirely, except for white Afrikaners. The correlation between the values of white Christian nationalism and what we saw at this UFC monstrosity, this abomination, it is Christian nationalism manifest physically. If you want to know what are the values of white Christian nationalism, go watch that UFC event. There's other things that happened there too. There were some ads about the history of our country, no mention of the atrocities of our country, of course not, because why tell the truth about who we have been and who we still are in many ways? Why tell the truth about the fact that we wiped out indigenous people, that we enslaved black people, that up till 50 years ago, my mom's generation, we were segregating black folks and white folks, and that the moral majority that started the whole, family values campaign in the right-wing space was founded really it was radicalized over school integration. Jerry Falwell, the founder of Liberty University and the founder of the moral majority, hated that the federal government started enforcing school integration. And he started saying, this is a violation of our religious freedom. Does that sound familiar? This is the history that this movement that you watched or that you saw last night stands on. And so when this fighter, I'm not even going to name him. Why? Why give him a name? When this fighter makes that statement, is it shocking? Sure. I mean, the fact that, again, this is said on national television on the White House lawn with the president of the United States sitting ringside? Absolutely. Is it surprising? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. We've known, in Trump's first run for president, he got endorsed by people like Richard Spencer. David Duke of the KKK has endorsed Tucker Carlson's segments on the Great Replacement Theory. It has been obvious for a decade. And so many of us have tried to tell our friends and neighbors who are conservative Christians, hey guys, the theology that you're swimming in is producing these outcomes. And they still don't see it. They still won't see it because they don't want to, because it's comfortable. We're about to celebrate Juneteenth, and the week before, this happens on the national lawn in front of the White House, in front of the president. Now, here's what you're going to see. I'm going to call it right now. You're going to see Republicans, some of them at least, feign outrage. Oh, how this is ridiculous. I can't believe this. This is so shocking. Don't give them an inch or believe them for a minute. They voted for this. If you have a conservative Christian friend of yours who pretends that they're shocked on Twitter or on Instagram, hold their feet to the fire and ask them why they voted for this. Because I'll tell you right now, this event wouldn't have happened if someone else was in office. This ideology that we're swimming in, that lies and promotes things that aren't true so often, and that is built on hatred and greed and capitalism and violence and domination and power and control, would not be nearly as in power as it is now under this man that they voted for. 80% of white evangelicals voted for this regime. The majority still support what they're doing. They support it all. They think this is somehow the biblical option. This is somehow godly. This is somehow God ordained. But those are the values that you saw on full display. I think the last point I want to say quickly is that this is nothing like Jesus. Nothing that MAGA stands for is Christ-like. In fact, my friend Ben Kramer, who's a great pastor and theologian, made the point that it's not Jesus who builds coliseums where men fight each other. That's what Cesar does. Trump is the embodiment of Cesar, flat out. There's just so many correlations, right? The greed, the capitalism, the whole, pomp and circumstance. There's the whole sense of grandeur, the fact that they had the military band singing songs. It's just the whole thing reflects the values of Christian nationalism. So much of it is mythology. So much of it isn't real. It's all for show. There's nothing of substance beneath it. Of course, it's built on hatred and racism. And it's designed around one man that they worship, that they are obsessed with, a man that they want to run for a third term, many of them. to break the Constitution that they swear they want to uphold, right? Weren't you taught, if you grew up like me, weren't you taught that Democrats hate the Constitution and hate America, and Republicans love the Constitution and love America? And the first day that this man got back into office, he tried to sign an executive order that erased the birthright citizenship part of the Constitution. Like, it's just crazy. It's crazy to witness and to watch. And here we are. We're producing trillionaires now. And the propaganda of big business and capitalism is so ingrained into conservative Christianity, and really even in many forms liberal Christianity, that we can't even have a real conversation about what's happening in our world. The fact that you and me are working our asses off trying to survive. We're not asking, is anyone out there asking for the government to give them $1 million? No. We're asking for our tax dollars to go to work for us. I'm asking for the ability not to worry about my healthcare costs. I have friends in Australia who think it's crazy that we worry about an ambulance bill, so we decide to drive ourselves. What we're asking for, if we work hard like we were told, can we earn a livable wage so we don't have to go into mounds of debt of all kinds? Educational debt, housing debt, transportation debt, medical debt, credit card debt. That's what we're asking for here. We can't have that in this country. But guys, we have the world's first trillionaire. We had a huge UFC event on the White House lawn. We're so back. Your gas price is through the roof. But hey, MAGA is here to save you. And this is how Trump shows how much he loves his own followers. By neglecting them, by emboldening and enriching his billionaire friends, and hosting this monstrosity of an event on the White House lawn, as if this is somehow indicative of the success of his administration. And white evangelicals are the ones who tried to gaslight you and me for so long that if we didn't vote for this man and this regime, we were not being biblical. We weren't being Christ-like. We weren't being godly. Absurd. Insane. Dumb. Mind-blowingly, bewilderingly crazy. That's why I do this work. That's why I make these videos. You're not alone in the insanity. I understand how crazy it is to watch every day what this administration is doing. And to think, wait, my pastor supported this? Like, there are churches out there that will tell you that Trump is bringing back God and country? Like, just look around. Where? For who? When? How? What does that even mean? What do these words mean? You want to take us back to what time in American history? What? When we were openly lynching black people? When slavery was still around? When we were tar and feathering people? When we were burning witches at the stake? When women couldn't vote? For some Christian nationalists, absolutely. They want that vote repealed. Anyway, those are my thoughts on the UFC fight that we all watched. Those are just the raw, unfiltered thoughts of what I think about when I see this stuff. That all goes through my head at one time. All these different connections, it's all interconnected to give us this. Your money paid for it. Billionaires got enriched. Racists got emboldened. But hey, apparently thanks to God's divine timing, Trump is in office because that's what God would have wanted. Thanks for being here, friends. Give this video a like. Please subscribe to the channel. I'm trying to hit 100,000 subs by the end of the summer. We're on the path. 80,000 is right around the corner. Means so much. If you want to support the work that I'm doing, please feel free to click the link in the description. It really helps me out and my family. Thank you. Talk to you all later on this week. See ya.